everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Magical Jill, and today we're going to be talking about an article that is from the enemy of all of our channels. There is a multiverse of all of the Degenerate J channels and all associatives, and I tell you what, CBR is the enemy of all of them.
I like how this joke is from like 4 years ago.
I think it's funny.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're taking a look at 10 Sailor Moon characters who apparently deserve a spin-off anime. Now, I want to say, I think we agree with some of these ideas. Some of them we think are ridiculous, like would not work at all.
Some of them we got crap for saying in our video.
Well, yeah, you're not, well, here's the thing, and we'll talk about this in a different video. You're not allowed to criticize anything that Naoko wrote. You're not allowed to criticize anything from Japan if you're not from Japan, but people from Japan can criticize you and your writing if you're not from Japan.
Yes,
that's just that's the rule of the internet, okay? The otaku has a complicated mind, and we do not attempt to understand it.
Well, this article was written by somebody named Sam Fang, and I do not know who or what ethnicity they are, but if they aren't Japanese, then I think that every single opinion on here is obviously not correct.
Some people are not going to know what we're talking about, but there were genuinely people saying that last time we talked about Sailor Moon. It's mind-boggling to me and hilarious. People gatekeep something they didn't even write, but...
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
We'll talk about that in the future, but, you know, we're going to hop into it. We do have a question of the day for you. Are there any stories that you, yes you, no matter where you're from, we're actually interested in your opinion, would want to see in the Sailor Moon universe?
Yeah, tell us.
Is there anything you want to see and what?
Describe your ideas in the comments so that way somebody can steal them and make a better anime of it.
I still want to see more video games, but we'll hop right into them. The first one, this one to me is hilarious. It's Motoki. Now, I don't want to be mean. Why Motoki?
Motoki does not need an entire spin-off anime. Could you imagine how boring an entire spin-off anime about just Motoki
It would just be a slice of life about Motoki working at the arcade and, I guess, his sister.
That sounds terrible. I don't want to watch that.
I mean...
who wants to see that?
If I'm going to see stories in the Sailor Moon universe, I don't want a slice of life about Motoki. That's the thing is when we're talking about these, a lot of these ideas would work as an OVA, sort of like an original video animation where it's... You know, if you've ever watched, it was especially more common in the past with anime, but they'd essentially be like one-off episodes. Sometimes they'd tie into the plot, sometimes they'd be non-canon of different anime, and they tackle side stories or things that might not necessarily fit in the story itself, and sometimes they adapt things that the mangaka or the manga author, and I know I pronounce everything wrong, that they would have written as a side story for their manga that maybe doesn't fit as episode 20 of a show.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these ideas would work well as something like that.
Yeah, I mean...
But not as an entire anime.
You want to do Motoki's Day Out or something? Fine. Would I love to watch it? No.
No.
But this does not need to be an anime.
But maybe somebody would.
So here's one that actually fits really well in terms of like the... both universes, because in the 90s... they did very little with these characters, and in Crystal and the manga, they're more important, but we still don't get to see a lot of them.
Yeah, so this one is about the 4 Heavenly Kings, and they were talking about having an anime centered around them. And I think that the best way to have an anime, and like in any way about them, would just be make a anime about the Silver Millennium. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be just about the Kings of Heaven. It doesn't have to be just about Princess Serenity, aka Sailor Moon. You know, I feel like if you had an entire anime about the Silver Millennium, not only would people love that, because it wouldn't be stepping on the toes of the ending that Naoko did, even though I feel like there could be more after that, and it would also be establishing more of the lore from beforehand and how their lives were back then, since they literally reference it all the time in both the show and the manga. I think it could be really interesting to have just an entire show about the Silver Millennium itself, rather than just the 4 Kings of Heaven or just Prince Endymion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it could almost be a Shakespearean tragedy in a way. Like, you don't need to talk too much about every aspect, but there was a lot of stuff as well with Endymion and Serenity and this star-crossed lovers thing. You had Serenity's mother, the queen, and some issues there. You had the stuff with Beryl. There's different versions of these stories anyway, and there's a lot of different unanswered questions in every version. And you know where it ends. This has worked for a lot of stories, even like the Star Wars prequels. Nobody cared that they knew where it ended, you know?
But people wanted to see a prequel.
How did it get there?
Yeah.
You know, what happened with Anakin? That's kind of my question here is like, what happened with the 4 Kings of Heaven in detail? What happened with Endymion in detail? That's one of the most fascinating time periods of Sailor Moon And it's been explored almost none.
I know, and it is really interesting because they do mention, like in the 90s show a lot, oh, Princess Serenity was really good at ice skating, and everybody always looked at her when she was ice skating and she was so pretty, or this girl was good at this, and we used to have these big parties, or I heard about this story back in the Silver Millennium, and, you know, things like that, like the cats will say those types of things, and I want to see that. I don't want to just be told about it.
It's just kind of like throwaway flavor text that they throw in there without actually telling you anything.
We're not going to mention every single one on the list, but this one I feel like we definitely need to mention because they basically said we should have an anime about Sailor Mars as her shrine priestess self. And it's like, I love that she's a shrine priestess.
This is another slice of life. I think Sam just loves slice of life, baby.
I guess so. And I love Sailor Mars, but like they're literally at the shrine all the time. All the time.
Especially in the 90s.
Especially in the 90s
like,
show.
if there's ever a, like, we need some dialogue here to tell you about the villain, it's happening at the shrine.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Always. And it's like, I feel like we see enough of that in the manga, in the animes. I just feel like we see enough of that. We know Rei was a priestess, and we know she's got some psychic powers. That's pretty cool. Well, that's all we need to know, I feel like. I think that there's some things where it's like that would be cool to expand upon. This is not one of those things.
I will say this. OVA set 5 years in the future, kind of wrapping up, you know, a little bit of what's going on in her life. Again, I'd be interested.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the 90s or the manga or Crystal or whatever. And no, the manga and Crystal are not exactly the same because they do change some details on them. I would do 90s. Because Yuichiro just drops off the face of the earth. Her grandpa kind of drops off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I'd like to know why.
Yeah, these characters just kind of don't matter near the end of the show. It's kind of like what happened to poor Naru. If you wanted to do something like that, cool. But a whole spin-off anime? I just don't know what you'd cover that's not already covered. So here's one that's interesting to me, which I actually agree with. It's Queen Beryl. But here's the thing. Her descent into darkness... This could just be what you said, the Silver Millennium. So this is the rise of the Dark Kingdom and sort of this tragedy leading into the Silver Millennium of how order in the Milky Way galaxy essentially was shattered, right? And then they had to be reincarnated.
And I feel like if you're doing a story, like if you were going to do a story about the Heavenly Kings, you would need to also show Beryl's descent into darkness for it to make sense, in my opinion.
And also to make Metalia a character, because in pretty much every version of the show, Metalia is more of just like a force. We don't really, other than Metalia's evil, and later on they're all united by chaos and corruption. Some of these villains are not really ever fully expanded on. Metalia is one of them.
My biggest problem too is Pharaoh 90 for that as well.
Yeah.
Especially in the 90s anime.
Yeah, I think that if you did do side stories, you could really get into that. Beryl is especially one that you could get into with a Silver Millennium show. Plus, by the way, the Silver Millennium is beautiful.
And I know, it's great. It would be an amazing entire anime. I feel like you have plenty of content there that it wouldn't just need to be like a one episode OVA thing like some of these concepts. It could be a whole anime. It would be really cool. This one talks about Chibi Chibi and how we should have a spin-off for her and her origins and her future. And I think this could be interesting, but like if you've seen the show or read the manga, either of the shows, you would know who Sailor Chibi Chibi really is. And I do think they get a little bit into the lore of that. They definitely could go into it more, and I would find that very interesting. But I just feel like we do already get enough of her to the point where I don't know if an entire anime we would need, maybe just an OVA for that one as well.
Well, when it comes down to it, you know, you could do Chibi Chibi, you could do some of the things that are in Stars or Eternal and Cosmos. You know, you could start tackling these ideas of alternate timelines or a future that may or may not come to pass. I don't know why you'd focus specifically on Chibi Chibi.
I don't know.
There's a lot here, and there's an idea they bring up later on that we're kind of skipping. I'll just mention it really quick, which is Galaxia. That would just tie into this right here. Like, why would you do two separate...
Yeah, just make an entire show about Chibi Chibi, Sailor Cosmos, Sailor Galaxia, the corrupted sailors. So this next one is Sailor Moon's Guardian Cats, and like an entire show based around them. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought, that's dumb. We don't need a slice of life of Artemis and Luna and Diana. But then the person actually kind of talked about how it would be interesting to see more of their life on planet Mao before they became like helpers of the Moon Kingdom sort of thing. And I did think that was interesting because we don't see anything about planet Mao, and we do know that they can like kind of become humanoid ish while also being felines, and it's kind of interesting, and I'd love to see more of how that works, but I don't know if an entire anime would be the solution for this. Again, I feel like a couple episodes for like an OVA or a couple of chapters in like kind of like an Elseworld manga, like a parallel story sort of thing. I feel like that would be interesting, but I don't think we need a super long, drawn-out thing about it.
When you say parallel story, do you mean you want it kind of like in a different timeline, like the parallel Sailor Moon, or just like a story that exists alongside but is unnecessary?
Either one. I don't care.
I mean, because if you go to Mao and it's an alternate timeline, I'm kind of like, why bother going to Mao?
That's true.
You know? So for
true.
me, if they're going to do anything with it, I'd be more interested in a main timeline. I like the cats. Is there really a need? Like, I guess that's just kind of my question on the cats.
Well, I would like to know why the cats are even with the Moon Kingdom in the first place. They never really mentioned that.
They get into a little bit of their history, but not much. So, yeah, I mean, again, an OVA, I think would be cool.
Yeah, I feel like that's the least of our worries that we need expanded upon in this.
Yeah, that's kind of my... Well, actually, Matoki would be the absolute least.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
Here's one which was weird to me, which is Hotaru, and they spelled Hotaru's name wrong, so...
Hey, don't be mean to Sam Fang.
I'm not trying to be. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. Sam Fang might be an absolute expert when it comes to this. I think for Hotaru, for me, this comes back to our idea of the Sailor Quartet. Like, just give me a show with Chibi Usa and Hotaru and the quartet in the future.
Yeah, we already know everything that happens to Hotaru throughout most of her life up until the point that she's reborn. And then after...
Then it goes kind of two different ways a little bit.
And then after that, it kind of goes two different ways, and it really depends on, like, the iteration.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, we already know all the way up to that point, so I would like to know more about afterward. So I feel like if you did an anime, it wouldn't need to be just about her. It would have to be about also Chibiusa and also the Sailor Quartet, and it would have to be kind of like season 1 of the original Sailor Moon again, except in the future with them kind of coming into their own as sailors.
Yeah.
And defeating their own threats, which would be extremely interesting because, you know, Dragon Ball all the time always has some new threat showing up to try and defeat the Earth. I don't understand why you couldn't just keep having some other random threat try to show up and defeat the Earth and have Chibiusa, who's now Sailor Moon, try to save it. I would really love to see her be the leader of her own group and come into her own and mature and become older and find more powers, you know, because really in the show we don't get to see, in my opinion, enough of her powers and the way that she's able to defeat things. We mostly are focused on Usagi herself.
You know, you could do something like Saturn was alive in the past, had to use this power, and then was reborn in the future. You know, if you want to do the past. But in terms of actually her, I just want to see the quartet. But what's weird is every time we talk about that, a lot of people get mad and say they don't want to see anything. We know where some of these characters end up, depending on what is true and is not about these futures that we see. You know, we know about the Crystal Tokyo and whether that happens or not, whatever you want to think. I don't really know because, you know, there's all the stuff of Chibiusa coming back. Then did that change the future? Did it not?
It kind of seems like to me it changed to the future, and also her meeting Helios I think also changes her future too. So I would love to see more about that, and Helios kind of be like her tuxedo mask, because I want to see more about their relationship, and I didn't get enough of it. I tell you what, I didn't get enough, and I love them.
I do want to throw in here though, this would get into territory that I don't think Naoko ever wanted to get into. You know, because to me, Naoko didn't want to explain certain topics. It really seems like she avoided explaining them. I don't know if she just didn't want to or didn't know what the answer was. But when it comes to time travel stuff, you'll have Cosmos and you'll have Neo Queen Serenity and you'll have Crystal Tokyo, and you'll say, okay, well, does the, you know, Dark Moon Clan coming back, does that change the future? Does it not? They wanted to do these destructive points right in the past, especially in the 90s, to change their future, which to me says, oh, they can change their future, right? But then also, if that was true, wouldn't Chibiusa coming back and meeting her parents completely change the possibility of her own birth? You know, but would it not? And then I'm saying you get into like this weird thing where it's like when Chibiusa goes back to her future, is it her future or is it still this Usagi's future?
I don't know.
And so now you get into all this stuff where I don't think the sci-fi aspect of time travel was considered in depth with Sailor Moon.
Yeah, it wasn't considered in depth enough, and it needs to be expanded upon.
Well, and my point is, I don't know if she wants to expand on it because it didn't seem like she liked getting into those nitty-gritty details that you and I like.
Well, if you're gonna put that in your manga, I feel like you should have to explain it. No
you
offense.
don't have to explain it.
You should at least explain it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it would be much better if it was, because as is, there's a lot of plot contrivances with Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
I love Sailor Moon, but every version of it, there's a lot of like avoiding explaining details so that you can get around them. And by the way, this last one that we want to talk about could even tie into that. That's Sailor Pluto. You know, you have her where she's kind of outside of time and space with the gate and everything.
She was supposedly told, I believe, by Neo Queen Serenity that she had to go guard the gate too. And then that's like her whole job.
Well, and then later on, her job is to be in a polyamorous, bisexual, lesbian triangle with Uranus and Neptune and
while raising Saturn.
And raise little Saturn.
Yeah, okay.
As like, you know, the mommy trio.
I kind of love that. Mommy trio.
Yeah, the mommy trio is iconic, I will say.
It is iconic.
And then when you actually see like things later on in the films and the manga, they're all walking around like basically Pluto's borderline wearing like lingerie tops around, you know, around the other two of them. Come on, look over here.
I mean, honestly, I feel like we could have a nice little OVA about the mommy trio, and that would be more interesting than just Sailor Pluto. Because I like Sailor Pluto a lot, but if you did like an OVA about just her at her door, I don't know how interesting that would be. I feel like if you did a whole anime about her, then you would need to involve a lot of different aspects of her life. You know, like how she ended up being the guardian of time, and then how she ended up being with Uranus and Neptune, like in that little group, and hanging out with them and trying to save the world.
Or the stuff in the original continuity with Setsuna and implying that she, I believe, had like a crush on Prince Endymion. It was kind of like she couldn't be with him because that was the princess's man, you know, and so she's the lonely guardian in a lot of ways. She's kind of put in this position where she is not supposed to interfere. Eventually she decides to anyways, because, you know, she's iconic, right? And she has these very interesting powers where in a lot of ways she's kind of set up to be the last defense against people messing with time.
Yes.
You know, like if all of the other guardians fell, Setsuna is supposed to be out there at the gate.
Yes.
You know, defending it.
And I think that's extremely interesting. I would love to see more of her. You know, and I feel like this idea could work, but you'd have to also make it about some other people too to make it fully work. If Naoko was involved, that would force Naoko to talk more about the time stuff.
I like how all of these come back to like, you have to get in. I mean, she's like one comment pointed out, I think she's more interested in collecting cars and just kind of doing her own thing than expanding her story. I get that she's had bad experiences in the anime and manga industry. I get that her husband is sick, like no one's saying he's not. People really insert themselves and overstate how much they know about her involvement with that, though. You know, like people keep saying, oh, well, her husband is sick who makes Hunter x Hunter.
So she makes the entire anime.
So she's doing Hunter x Hunter for him, and I'm like, what, Hunter x Hunter hasn't come out, so clearly she's not doing it for him. Like they support each other.
I feel like this could be a whole nother video,
right? Yeah, I mean, well, but then you're paparazzi style diving into the life of this woman, which I'm uncomfortable doing.
Which is kind of creepy.
I just noticed a lot of fans insert their opinion on what she's doing, and our point is just, if you ever want to expand these stories, there's a lot of things you could get into that tons of fans would be interested in, tons of other creators would be interested in. Your thing does not have to go on forever, but when you look at some of these other creators, like you look at Toriyama up until his death, you look at people like Oda, you know, with One Piece. I saw a comment mention these two word for word, and you see how much they've expanded their world, whether you like it or not. They tried to make their world a living, breathing world. I am fine with some things ending. Like Full Metal Alchemist, you told the story you wanted to.
It had a perfect ending, and it had a perfect... It was such a good, like, mystery type story where everything got wrapped up into a nice little bow. It was perfect. And we don't need tons more added to it, even though I would love that.
Yeah, if you want to do more in the world, you could. But the difference with that is there's not 500 different plot threads dangling out there with no explanation.
And I feel like that is Sailor Moon's problem, is it has different plot threads that are dangling out there that need answers that people are going to question. Obviously, Naoko doesn't need to be forced to do it, but if she did, I think it would make the series a lot more wrapped up You know, like a lot cleaner and a
Yeah.
lot less plot holey.
I think for me, the things I will say that I'm most interested in are, there's three. The alternate timelines, you know, Cosmos, what could happen in the future with Galaxia, things like that.
And with Chibiusa.
And the Chibiusa's future with the quartet. And also the Silver Millennium. Like,
Yes.
I'm most interested in those three things.
And I think those three ideas would help wrap up the story very nicely, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of our thoughts on it. And last time I made a video about this where like I talked about should Sailor Moon continue, people had a lot of very, very either vitriolic comments to say about it or very interesting ideas. And then there are some ideas that were like kind of terrible, like no offense.
I'm sure half of our ideas are terrible too, so that's fine. There's like a subset of fans that are very defensive of Sailor Moon who act like they worked on it and they wrote it. And to me, it's like, I love this stuff. It's not my only interest. And if somebody has an opinion, like Sam here, Sam had some opinions I don't agree with. That doesn't make him not a real fan, right? That doesn't mean that he's just totally wrong.
Yeah.
I just disagree with him on some stuff. He might know 10 times as much as me, or he might have been assigned to write this article and know very little.
But he also brought up some interesting points that could inspire better ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
But, you know, to me, that's kind of where the discussion ends, is I have some differing ideas. Here's why I feel that way. That's it. I'm not threatened by his opinion. And something we're going to talk about in the future is it does seem like some Sailor Moon fans especially are really threatened by asking questions about the manga and the 90s anime and all these different things. It's just kind of odd to me, but that'll be a topic for another day.
I kind of think it's because they don't want their perfect thing to be picked apart, but the problem is Sailor Moon isn't perfect.
Well,
The character isn't and the story isn't, and even though it's great, it's like, it's not supposed to be perfect, but it could be, you know, it could have some things, you know, to help it too.
Right, nothing's perfect, but, you know, if you don't have that kind of thing where you pick the brain of people, you talk about things, you enjoy them, if all you do is consume and say, thing good, move on, why bother consuming it?
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of my thing. But anyways, I thought this was interesting. It was a lot longer than I thought it would be. We got lots of other channels. We've got a Fortnite code, DJAY123, and our store, CosmoBunny.shop, where we make awesome transformative art pieces out of manga, magazines, articles,
Comic books.
pamphlets, comic books, paper we find on the street. That one's a joke, but basically...
It basically is recycled paper we find on the street.
It's paper that's damaged. People get this wrong idea that we print things out, like we're going to go print out a picture of a manga or print off a picture of a character. We don't do that. What we do is we take these different damaged manga and damaged books and we make something transformative out of it for your home.
Our discount code is code SAILOR in all caps for 10% off of your purchase. So I hope you guys go check out my shop because all of my resin pieces are one of a kind, and I also make really cool handmade jewelry. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye!
Bye. Now be quiet, you stupid American. Talking about anime, you think you get an opinion on this?